Good evening, everyone who's here. We have the graveyard shift, which stands between us and drinks. So there's a consensus here with the panel. If everybody wants to go and chat by the bar, we can all go and do that. Today we're going to be talking about, or this afternoon, we're going to be talking about the Botswana property listed sector. And I'm going to start first by talking about Botswana and the different economic shifts that have come through, but rather in a more simplistic manner. Okay. So Botswana, we've been known for diamonds and beef. Basically, if you're a woman and you don't have diamonds on your ears or your hands, somebody's doing something wrong, either your financial planner, your husband, or your employer. With regards to beef, if you don't have any cattle, you do not deserve to be in the table of men. But obviously things have changed, and less people want to have diamonds. We have the millennials who are more interested in buying an iPhone over a diamond in a lot of markets that we have as targets. And then more people are into vegetarians rather than beef. That's a very simplistic perspective of the economic shifts that we have all talked about and different countries have experienced. And the whole day, everybody has been talking about that. Quite simply, if your economy has been based on commodities, there has been a shift and you have to make a plan about it. For us in Botswana, one of the key ways in which we have moved it towards diversification, it has been through the Botswana Stock Exchange. That is Gaborone between 1990 and 2000. During this time, a lot of the developments were financed by the pension funds, government, and different partnerships. During this period, only RDC was listed on the Botswana Stock Exchange. So our BSE has been operating really, really well since it started back in 1995. And basically it is because of the highest sovereign credit rating in Africa, that is in Botswana, stable currency, liberalized markets, no exchange controls, enforceable property rights, and strong capital base. That is, we do have quite a bit of capital available in our market. This presents a very strong position for our stock exchange. And as such, over the past 20 years, we have seen in 1996, RDC get listed for the second time, because the first time it was listed under Botswana share market in 1992, and then it came back as a VRLS in 1996. In 2002, we saw Turnstar listing. So between 1996 and 2006, which is a 10-year period, we only had 2 property counters. In 2007, we have Primetime coming in. 2011, we had a double listing, which was Little Larona and New Africa Properties. And then in 2016, we have Far Properties coming in. In the next period of 10 years, between 2006 and 2016, we've got 4 property counters coming in. The question would be, in the next 10 years, are we looking at 8 or less, or are we looking at 20, being that our capital markets are growing faster? Now, the growth of the BSE and the real estate sector now gives us that position. That is our new CBD. Not that we have developed the other one that we looked at much more, but that we have advanced our market such that we've got different products that are more competitive in terms of global markets. Now, what we are discussing here today with my panelists here, Sandy Kelly, who is the CEO of Primetime, Utule Bale from Kuma Property Asset Management, Thapelo Tseole from the Botswana Stock Exchange, and Guido Jaketi from RDC, it's going to be giving us different perspectives from all of the players that are participating in our Botswana Stock Exchange, from the institutional-based perspective, from the different property listed companies and also from the stock exchange. I hope you enjoy, and we'll try to do it quickly enough for us to move on to the next stage of the evening. Thank you. So let's start first by you introduce yourself and your business, and then we can go on to the next questions.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, Guido Giachetti. I was involved from the incipients of RDC Properties in 1992 when the market was a share market and not a stock exchange, and saw the growth of the portfolio over the last few decades, now 2.5 decades. Clearly, we are now many players on the market with a very small market of properties. So clearly, the question of Setebe is, will we have 20 in the next 10 years? I doubt it. That's one, sure, I think on that is a prediction that is not too far. The reasons for listing, and I think that's quite, we have not probably heard it too much, but when we listed in the first place, was we came from an experience in Nigeria where our property portfolio and our company had quite a large exposure, and we were nationalized during 1974 and 1977 through the indigenization decree, and basically lost 60% of a business that at the time had 9,000 employees and an asset base and a turnover of $100 million in 1977. So it was quite clear that something had to be done for us to be more protected going forward. And one of the things that I thought of doing was to actually list on the stock exchange. So it might seem strange, but that was one of the reasons to list in the first place, saying in the long term that might be a way to protecting our investment, because as a listed company you cannot be really nationalized or anything can happen to it. Clearly the other advantage is exposure to partners, is raising capital for new developments. And if I roll forward clearly from the portfolio that we had at the time, which was roughly 24 million pula, and we're now around 1.5 billion pula, so totally different after many years. And I think that exposure has allowed us now to be looking at the whole region, Mozambique, Namibia, and South Africa. So that gives you another perspective of why you would list, that is not necessarily just to collect, to get some funding.
Thank you. You can take the next question. With regards to having started the stock exchange back in 1995, I think you can also talk about the stock exchange and where it started. But like, what are the major differences between that time, its rules now, and what are the difference in the experiences during that period, during that 20-year period that the stock exchange has been?
Thank you. My name is Thapelo Tseole, Chief Executive Officer of Botswana Stock Exchange. I think, as all of you might be aware, as a stock exchange, we provide a platform where companies that want to raise cash in whatever form can approach us and do that. We have undergone evolution like any other evolving stock exchanges in the world, from being a share market, like Guido have said, to being a stock market in 1994-95. And we managed to increase the number of sectors. And one of the reasons why there have been an increase in the number of companies from about 1 in 1996 to 2 in 2002, but now to about 6 with a market capitalization of about 7 billion pula, or 10 billion rands roughly. It possibly shows that we are able to provide a proper platform where companies can actually issue this type of instrument. But in terms of evolution, majority, if not all of the companies listed in the stock market are mainly variable loan stock type of companies, which is a combination of debenture-like and equity kind of structure. We are not yet at the REITs stage, but I think the structure that we do in Botswana, also the legislature permitting in terms of the taxation, is closer to REITs. It's more favorable to our current economic dynamic, and I'm 100% sure that the present issuers like the way we have structured and offered the platform to them. But of course, there is evolution in every market, there is development in every market, but it's up to us to see how best to do what is suitable to the local market as we grow. But the fact that, the variable loan stock companies makes up to 15% of the domestic market capitalization, I think is the third largest sector by size, followed by this banking and financial services and retail, I think is the fourth. And also even in terms of turnover, it contributes about 22% of the total turnover of the stock market, shows that I think the platform that we are providing is conducive enough. But if it's not conducive, it's evolving to be one of the best platforms for a developing market or a developing country like Botswana.
Thank you, Tapelo. Sandy, recently you guys have done quite a bit of corporate actions on the Botswana Stock Exchange to raise capital for a few developments in Africa. Is it a trend that you think would continue as an alternative to getting funding, or why do you do it through that capital raising as opposed to just getting normal traditional debt?
Okay, just Sandy Kelly, the MD of Time Projects and Prime Time. Time Projects is our operating company and Prime Time is the listed fund. Satebi, in answer to your question there is, it's a little bit of a story here, that at one of the first sessions that we had here, Standard Bank was one of the sponsors, okay, with Stanlib, and the speaker was talking about property funding in Africa, and one of the delegates from the floor asked the question, said, can you tell us what deals you've currently got on the table and what deals have you done? And it was 0 in both boxes, okay? But since then, they have done quite a lot of business, but you'll find that it's quite a challenge with the banks to actually get business done. You'll find that the UK banks, basically Barclays and Stanchart, through things like the Middle Eastern crisis some 25 years ago, they withdrew all the stuff, and in fact 1999 as well, when things exited from Hong Kong. A lot of the banks drew their claws in, and then even just before 2008, the South African banks closed down on the credit side of things, and so it's become quite difficult. In fact, credit in Botswana is a challenge all right throughout, not only in the listed property space, but in the residential space for homeowners. But not to say that that's the only factor. The bond market just right now, it's really in the last few years, and it's likely to continue. There's a lot of liquidity in, particularly in the short-term market, and then one of Bali's partners, basically BIFM, Botswana Life, they've got a growing portfolio. I mean, their life portfolio grows at over 1 billion pooler a year, and they've got to find a home, for the money. and there's no long-term assets. I mean, there's a shortage of listed government bonds. There's a limit of how much debt that they issue. The short-term capital market being Bank of Botswana's certificates, BOTSWANA'S as they're known, as trading at like 2.25% or something like that. That's 3-month, 90-day paper, and so it's really unattractive. You know, deposit rates in the bank are maybe 4 or 5%. So there's an opportunity with the liquidity in the pension fund and fund manager market to raise the capital there. So we did a bond issue about 5 years ago, which was actually mostly taken up by actually BIFM. But a lot of the other players, investors in the market, they said, why don't you have the confidence of your own paper? So we issued our own paper last year, and during the course of the last 12 months, we've raised 300 million pula. Now in South African markets, that's not a huge amount, but that, in addition to that, we had a rights issue of 200 million pula, and so you know, we've grown our portfolio based on that by you know, we've gone from just over 1 billion pula in total assets at the year end 31st of August last year to now we're probably about 1.2, and very shortly we'll be 1.5 billion funded by this. There's difficulties in getting funding in the countries like Zambia, where we're very active in Zambia. So we're having to take funding from Botswana and invest there. What we have done is we've gone. There's one of the earlier sessions they were talking about this wall of money. Is the wall of money? You know, 5 years ago there was a massive amount of money in the UK and the US and that looking to invest in Africa. That's kind of gone away because obviously the commodities have gone down, yields have come down from 10-12% in Africa. They now the trading yields are more like kind of 8%, or maybe even some places just under that. And so the funding is a bit of a challenge. So when we went to our investors a few years ago and sort of said to them, should we take this money that we are offered from overseas, or how are you in the local market, the local fund managers? They said, please don't go overseas. Please come to us first, which is what we did, and they supported us. And then more recently, in the last 12 months, we've gone back to them. And also, like, let's say, initially when we kicked off, we were just an income fund. When we've gone back to them now and we sort of said to them, are you prepared to back us going into other countries like Zambia? And they said, yes, we know you, we've known you for your track record, we're prepared to back you. Okay. Secondly, are you prepared to back us on developments? I said, well, you've done some developments in Botswana, and you've proved yourself there, and your portfolio is built up from your own developments in time projects. So if you're going to go and do them there, provided you've got the same rules that you play by, you know, pre-letting, you know, just being careful on the risk, we'll back you there as well. So we went to the market and we raised the capital, both in the debt and in the equity, and that's fantastic. And part of the reason, and Tupelo is under a bit of a challenging space here, because in actual fact we're almost looking at counters leaving the exchange rather than more coming on, because the economy has been quite listless. So, and in our space here, we've got 6 listed property funds, plus my good friend here on the right. You know, at BIFM, we've got, I don't know how much, probably close to 1 billion pula in the market, plus the Public Offices Pension Fund, who's got 1 billion in the market. There isn't opportunity for us to go and buy assets, so we've either got to develop them. There isn't much growth in our market, so we've got to go outside, and that's what we're doing. You know, there's still limited opportunity happening in Botswana, but yeah, that's about where we are at the moment. Not much more I can say.
All right, thank you. Bale, from an asset management perspective, what are the key evolutions of the real estate sector and how it's growing, and in terms of what Sandy just spoke about, exploring the African continent? Is there that great appetite, or is there special treatment for those that have been in the BSE for a long time with experience, with the track record? Or is there really an appetite for new comers who want to go into the same areas or even explore other markets which nobody else has explored so far?
Thank you, Steve, and good evening, everyone. My name is Utule Bale. I'm the CEO of Kumo Property Asset Management, which is a company owned 50% by Botswana Insurance Fund Management and Aries Property Group of South Africa. Our core business, as Tebe said, is actually in property asset management. But just to give a perspective on how property asset management has contributed to the evolution of money into the real estate sector. I think, as Steve had shown in the earlier slides, a lot of activity happened between 2002 and 2016, where we saw many companies coming onto the stock exchange. I think the background on the Botswana property market was that in the earlier years, before this rush of activity, there's always been an imbalance between supply and demand of properties. For some time, where returns in property were almost guaranteed, but as the market grew and became more sophisticated and competition came on board, then it meant, from the asset management perspective, a number of things needed to be improved. The manner in which properties were managed, the efficiencies, as well as the information availability had to be done a lot better. One would, from the Botswana background, would know that information availability had been a problem in the past. There's a saying that if you can't measure it, then you won't manage it properly. We struggled with information in the past, and in the last 5 years, we at BFIM, plus the real estate profession, joined hands to introduce the format of measuring the performance of property in Botswana. And that really has opened doors for investors who are now having the levels of skepticism on property going down and investment coming more and more into the real estate sector. So I think at the moment, with about 7 listed properties and the size of our market, I don't think there will be that many more opportunities for companies to invest in, but to explore outside markets. Because at the end of the day, the underlying factor that determines whether or not people put more money is actually the assets themselves. How many of them do we have in the market, and at what quality? With the advent of the listed entities, we've seen the quality of stocks that we have in the market improving quite a lot. We now have 4 or 5 major centers, shopping centers in Gaborone, which really are backed by these listed entities. And I think as we go forward, the efficiencies, the transparency around the market would help attract new money and explore those areas that are untapped. Areas such as in hospitality, areas such as in triple P developments with the public sector. I think those are areas where we can still say there will be opportunities. Thank you.
Guido, you started the first variable rate loan stock in Botswana. And Tapelo was alluding to, our market is not ready for REITs. Do you think that other African countries should rather go our VRL's route, or should they rather go straight into the REITs model?
Yeah. Let me explain, first of all, why we were the pioneer of the VRLS is because when we started, the first listing was in '92, and it was a normal limited company. And we were not supported by the local pension funds because they preferred to have direct investments in properties rather than through the stock exchange, because we were taxpayers in our right before distribution of dividends. And so we managed to convince the government that it was important to structure it as a variable rate loan stock so that the pension funds would support the market. And in fact, that's exactly what happened. And if you look at the pension funds, they are the largest investors in all of these counters. The 6 counters are definitely, I would say, majority controlled, and not controlled, but invested by pension funds. So that worked. REITs, clearly, we, in general, if you look at and I'm pretty sure that the BSC will support this. If you look at the counters, the 6 of them, we all distribute generally quite a lot of our income. Whether it's, we in our case distribute 50, we retain only 15% of income. So generally it is across the board between 15 and 25, I think. And so we are really acting if we were a REIT. But in a developing country like Botswana, where to actually grow, you need to do developments, it is important to have an instrument that allows us to do developments and retain our portfolio. So I think the structure we have as variable rate loan stocks is very useful and works well. And as Sandy was saying before, the institutions on the market actually support us in the growth, in the expansion in the market. So whether we do a little bit of development and then a little bit of acquisitions, I think they're supporting us. So I really don't see the need of a REITs at this stage on the market. Clearly, when we will be bigger, when we'll have portfolios that can be just structured as a fund to distribute income, then we'll have to reconsider this.
Tapelo, what are the key structures that you think are important in creating and embracing the growth of capital markets in the real estate sector that other countries can draw from, which we have experienced in Botswana?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we need to do mostly in a lot of African countries is to really understand the stage of growth of the capital markets vis-a-vis the industries that you possibly want to grow in the economy. And if you have a good match of that, and then you develop rules and regulations and structures that are able to fit into the holistic ecosystem of the development, I think that is how you'll be able to get right. I mean, it's clear on the agenda of the stock exchange, the long-term view is to have a REITs market, simply because that is what majority of the international investors understand. But if you look at this present structure of our market, I think the variable loan stock suits well what we do. And in any case, we have excess capital in the economy to actually grow the market without necessarily trying to run outside the country to attract the investors. So it have worked for us quite well, but it have to be very clear that the long-term agenda, of course, is to be like a developed type of structure in the property market, which is REITs, which is what we fully support. But if you look at what also Guido was saying and Sally was saying, that, I mean, look at the pension fund industry in Botswana. It's about 77 billion pula, of which I think as of March this year or something, 4 billion was sitting in cash. I mean, you can imagine what you can do with 4 billion pula For those of you who don't know the currencies, the pool has the African dollar, so you can just imagine and play with the numbers. It's 1:10. And then you multiply with a larger number if you are to think in rent terms. So that is how we are. But I think the most important thing is to understand the ecosystem. Understand the ecosystem, do what is good for you in terms of development, and also to create opportunities as the stock exchange. One of the things that have worked very well for us is that as a country, Botswana, we have competitive and comparative advantages. Some of the companies that are listed in the structures are able to raise capital in Botswana and expand into the region. That is the other opportunity that comes into play in terms of, are there any additional listing that can come into play? Yes, of course, I know all these other 6 companies, but I'm not particularly too sure any of these particular companies have expanded anywhere beyond outside Africa, except maybe in the Seychelles and Madagascar. But we have seen a lot of South African companies coming from an economy that doesn't have as much cash as we have in terms of access, expanding into Eastern Europe and into other countries. But what we are saying is that we offer a platform as the stock exchange to raise capital and then expand that capital as long as the platform that we are offering is able to allow you to do that. And in any case, we in your introduction, you said we export diamond and beef, but there's the third aspect, is cash. We put cash in its raw form and expand it outside the country.
That's great. Looking at what you just said with regards to amount of cash that we have, if one were to think about the different products that we can create that are backed by the direct properties, do we have room for that in our market, and are we legislatively prepared if one would come in and say want to have a mortgage-backed security or any other type of products on the stock exchange?
Yeah, I think in terms of the been coming from a very vibrant economy, in terms of legislation, I think we have been accommodative to a lot of structures that are able to come into place. And I don't think even the national legislature actually is very restrictive in terms of those things. So I will generally say we are generally prepared in some form, and where we need to be changing some rules to accommodate very good initiatives, I think we can be able to do that. Just like Guido and Sally have said, I mean, when the structure of the variable loan stock companies came into place, I think the asset managers were able to embrace it. That clearly shows you that, I mean, there's some form of acceptance to innovation to some extent.
Okay, before I ask all of you to say your caution or your advice to anyone looking at our capital markets, are there any questions on the floor?
I'll answer that one. I think the answer was actually given by Sandy before. Yes, definitely. We all trading literally all on cautionaries right now, because we're all looking at expansion on the market in the region and abroad. In fact, abroad when I say out of the sub-Saharan Africa. So there's quite a fair amount of companies looking around. And the support from the institutions is definitely there for that, because of the small market that Botswana is. But with the cash that is available, we are able we just are ready to take opportunities all around the region.
Yeah, just to expand on that, Louise, is that I don't think enough outside investors look at Botswana. I mean, we have very few Tapela will say, you know, how many foreign investors apart from, let's say, the founding investors, like let's say Barclays holds a big chunk of Barclays, and FNB holds a big chunk of FNB, and SAB Mills or ANB InBev owns a whole lot of Sachaba. But to get other funds, like let's say some Africa funds or foreign investors coming and investing in Botswana, I think that we've just been so small that we've been kind of off the radar. But it's a, you know, it's a really, it is a diamond, and it's secure and stuff like that. So we might not have the biggest yields, but it's low risk. So what we've got to actually do is promote that so we do get further investors into Botswana. Also, that what we have got is you know, we here in South Africa, and everybody suffers here from this whole thing of this South African Reserve Bank regulations on foreign currency. So whilst you know, they're going through this big promo at the moment, so that everybody's got to declare all their foreign assets. In Botswana, we don't have that. So the capital can move in and out very freely. We have capital availability, and earlier talked about having to insure foreign investment. So you know, the grit people, what they've done is that they've actually insured some of their investments, so that they can actually, whilst they've got the dollars that are earning dollar assets, earning dollar income, that they can make sure that they've got the dollars at the end of the day that can actually float to Mauritius to go back to the investors. But we don't have that problem in Botswana. We actually quite, you know, touch wood, we're lucky we've got dollars in the market. So that should happen, and it should do that. So we've got a market that's conducive for that. Then getting on to the pension funds, again with that, our Pension Fund Act and our Regulatory Act allows the pension funds to invest up to 70% offshore. So the Alan Greys of this world that are managing pension funds, they can take 70% of those assets and put them into USD, Euro, Pound, Far Eastern funds, or whatever they want to do. But they make that decision on behalf of the pension funds and their asset allocation. All right. What we've got to do as Primetime and RDC and all the other funds for that matter, we've got to make decisions what's good for us and our investors, of which Guido and his family own a substantial portion. I own, you know, a chunk of what we've got. We've got to manage that on behalf of all the other investors that are in there and make the right decisions for them. So we will look outside, and there's a shortage of investment opportunity. Just like Tapelo said, there's 4 billion pula floating around in the pension fund market without a home. You know, they've got to keep some cash, obviously, and they've got to keep a reasonable amount of cash. But there's not that very many investments. So we've got opportunity to go and look elsewhere, and we will, yeah. And I think that other people should do as well.
Any other question?
Good afternoon. My name's Sean Elgin. We've got investments in Botswana, and it is an excellent investment destination. I'd just like to ask two quick questions. One is, could you possibly comment on liquidity in the commercial banks, which there's a lot of money floating around in the pension funds. I read an article recently in one of the papers I was just trying to find, I couldn't find off the top of my head, that commented that the commercial banks are battling a bit with liquidity, which is something that happened a couple of years ago as well. And secondly, do you see any domestic investment opportunities? You talk a lot about investing outside of the country. Do you see any domestic opportunities? Thank you.
Okay, I will attempt the question on local investment opportunities. I think if we look at the stock that we have, it's only in recent years that we've had better quality stocks that now the likes of Primetime, BFM, and others listed have. There's an opportunity on those old properties that have been there for many years that are looking to be relived. I think it's an area that we need to look at. We have the old area in Gaborone, for instance, called the Main Mall. I think a few buildings in the properties in there are crying for a renewal of life where people can come in and put their money. A few factors that have happened also in the recent past that have accelerated development of property have meant that some sectors are now at a level where demand is matching supply, and others are where we are now beginning to think probably supply is more than the demand in the market, especially in the office sector. The other opportunities, if I take the instance of our new CBD, there's a new office buildings that are coming up, huge buildings, but the level of provision of parking is going to be an issue. There's an opportunity for parkades there, especially if those could be provided in a full package where you have a parkade and you have a transport system around the buildings for people to really find good use of them. I think, yeah, in terms of opportunities, I can quickly think along those lines, over and above the triple Ps that I mentioned, to provide infrastructure for public space. Thank you.
The issue of bank liquidity, yeah, I agree with you. We also read it in newspapers, but I think the banks came to refute it, also in newspapers. So we'll read it there again. In terms of the domestic opportunities, I tried as much as possible not to say this, but I think you pushed me to the limit to say it. I've recently been appointed chairperson of Special Economic Zones Authority in Botswana. And under that, there's a lot of infrastructural opportunities that are going to be coming up, depending on the success of the projects, which depend on me, of course. So I think that's where a lot of opportunities are going to come into, but I can only see up to this much. Don't ask me what and why, but I see a lot of opportunities into that. Government have provided funding under NDP 11 and even under the 3 previous financial years, and even under the current financial year, to provide infrastructural servicing of the land. The money is there, it's there on the budget speech, the money is there in the accounts, so it's not an issue. Land allocation, it's there also in the 8 zones that the government identified in terms of the special economic zones. So I think, but here, because I came in my capacity as Stock Exchange CEO, I wanted to try to limit myself into that. But then I'll speak from authority as chairperson of special economic zones that there are other opportunities that the country is going to be unraveling.
Maybe the answer is obvious to the guys on the stage. I'm of the opinion the Pula is undervalued. What will happen to their investments and the other guys if it suddenly goes to where it should be? Or maybe you don't agree with that opinion.
You're putting me on the spot here by answering to this one. No, I'm saying to Setebe that she's putting me on the spot to answer this one. Clearly, it is a risk for us investing out of the country and investing in different currencies. Clearly, that's an issue that we are dealing on a daily basis. How do we hedge ourselves with our Pula that is now trading at 1.330 roughly with the rand, and what is going to happen to that? But if you look at the trend over long term, and I'm taking the last 20 years, the Pula has generally devalued with euro or dollars in general, and you're talking about a devaluation of roughly 6, 7, 8% over the year on year. So things have changed a little bit since they've changed the basket. That was 2 years ago. So that's clearly slightly different. With the rand, we've had peaks, I think, in the last 20 years at 1.72 to the rand, but we've had times where we were at 1.1. In general, we're talking about 1.3, 1.35, 1.25. That's generally what has happened in the last few years. So there is a monetary basket that is, which has got an element of different currencies, and these include the rand, include dollars, include now the Chinese currency, RMB. So I think overall we are very much linked to the trading with South Africa. So I don't, we are in the same. When the South African currency devalues strongly, we generally have a devaluation with the foreign currency too. So clearly on our side, to edge that, we try to take some forward covers, and we try to have leases in dollars in the jurisdiction where we can have a lease in dollar.
Yeah, although I'll let the guys to answer it, but the fact that Botswana operate a crawling peg in terms of the currency, the way he explained it, and also this transparency in terms of what are the weights to the various basket of currencies that makes the pull up. I think it makes it better because guys are able to know the risks that they have. But also, that is where in an African country, stability comes in. One thing we are sure of is that the president won't wake up one night and change ministers like it happens in other countries that I can't mention. So you see, it provides stability because as a country that have got good governance structures, is well managed, of course those risks are there, but if it's stable and good governance, it gives you surety that what the authorities say in terms of the foreign exchange policies, which is clearly public knowledge, how much the rand takes, how much the dollar takes in terms of that cruel impact, it becomes much more easier.
There's a question over there first, and then I'll come to you.
I just want to ask, the speakers have mentioned that there's a lot of liquidity in Botswana, and I just want to understand where is it exactly, because if you look at the BSE, there doesn't seem to be a lot of trading activity there. So, like, when you say there's a lot of liquidity, is it like in the hands of, as you've mentioned, the pension funds, and they're just waiting to deploy it, or?
Yeah, I think because we said liquidity, in economics, liquidity is used differently. One of the reasons why the BSE doesn't trade in terms of much, it's the absence of investment instruments. If you invested in a lot of these property companies, and then you take out your money in terms of selling, it is going to be very difficult for that cash to find home somewhere else. So what guys will typically do under majority of the instrument is to buy and hold till whatever. So the excess in terms of liquidity, we mean the cash available in the economy. We can't even absorb close to 40% of the pension fund money. That is why the pension funds only fills up to 30% as required, and then just the rest, they just send it outside. So it is the cash.
Where did Kaffi go? He had his hand up. Any other question? Are we done? Okay, so now your last word, each one of you. 5 seconds.
Okay. All right, my last words are based on, I think, the very nature of Botswana, where I always say, as a country, we didn't get too far too soon. That meant we built capabilities slowly, but going into the right direction, made sure that our laws are continually being amended to be receptive and of the new products that we have in the real estate sector. And I would also say, from the asset management side of things, it is a critical area that must also see continual improvement to just get the confidence of all the people with money, the pension funds, institutional investors, because we are aware that allocation into property is still lagging behind in terms of their statement of investment principles. So as we look for investments, I think we should follow this thing that we have, that we don't go too far too soon before we are able to handle things.
My final word was, I was asked a question by my colleague, Tony Morolong. If you look around outside there, you know, who owns all the property, you know? I said, but we are properly integrated in this African society here, you know? So if you crossed a Jew, who historically owned everything, with a Zulu, what would you get? You get the night watchman who owns the building.
Yeah, I think for me, my last tweets will be, if you have any ideas in terms of what you want to do in Botswana, either in the stock exchange or in the economy, let's have a conversation. Let's talk before the opportunities leave you behind. Thank you.
On my side, we've been foreign investors in Botswana for the last 40 years as a group, and we are very happy with our investments in Botswana. It's a very safe place to invest. It's got the right structures, the right governance, the political stability. Of all African countries, I invite you all to come and look around and possibly invest into the counters that you've just heard.
Sorry, Satebi, that wasn't my last word. I just, no, what I would say is I just endorse what the fellows have said here, is that, that we do have a lack of investment opportunities in Botswana, but we've got a fantastic platform. There is commodities like coal, you know, copper's research there. You know, there's a few things that are going on, some natural gas, and so on. So I think that there's a lot there. There's fantastic tourism market. And whilst diamonds are not forever, they're going to be there for quite a long time, which will create a good platform. The governance of the country, the rule of law, which you don't have in a lot of other African countries. Things happen. If you want them to happen, they can happen. And you know, so I think there's an incredible platform, and we'd like to see more foreign investors coming in, joining with us, and working off that platform to go and do stuff, not only in property, but in all sorts of things. Guido's in the hospitality industry. We're not in that. You know, all sorts of things. Letsecho is all the way up Africa as a microfinance provider. And there's other businesses which can come off Botswana's platform to go and do that. So get the word out there and come and join us, and we'll take you along.
Thank you so much to my wonderful panel, and to all of you. Thank you for sticking around for the graveyard shift, and thank you for being with us. Thank you.